The glass towers of downtown reflected the early morning sun as Elena Martinez swiped her key card at the entrance of Webb and Martinez Law, the prestigious firm she had built from nothing alongside her business partner 5 years earlier. The marble lobby gleamed with the kind of understated elegance that whispered success to every client who walked through those doors, but Elena barely noticed the opulence anymore. Her mind was already racing through the day ahead, mentally reviewing the final details of the Hartwell Corporation merger that would close this afternoon. Before we dive deeper into Elena's story, I'm curious about where you're watching from today. Whether you're commuting to work in New York, having coffee in California, or anywhere else in the world, this story of workplace betrayal and ultimate justice resonates everywhere. Drop a comment and let me know what state or country you're joining us from. Elena's heels clicked against the marble as she headed toward the elevators, her arms full of legal briefs and contract amendments. At 34, she had already earned a reputation as one of the most skilled corporate attorneys in the city, known for her meticulous attention to detail and her ability to navigate the most complex business deals. Her black hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, and her navy suit was perfectly tailored, projecting the kind of professional confidence that came from years of proving herself in rooms full of men who initially dismissed her. The elevator doors opened to reveal Marcus Webb, her business partner, already dressed in his signature charcoal gray suit with gold cufflinks that caught the light. Marcus was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of effortless charm that came from generations of family money and connections. His sandy brown hair was perfectly styled, and his blue eyes held the confident gleam of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. "Good morning, Elena," Marcus said with his practiced smile as she stepped into the elevator. "Ready for the big day? I have to say, this Hartwell deal is going to put us on the map in a whole new way." Elena nodded, shifting the weight of her files. "The contracts are solid. I spent most of last night reviewing the final amendments with their legal team. Everything should proceed smoothly at the 2 o'clock signing." Marcus pressed the button for the 15th floor, where their corner offices overlooked the bustling financial district below. "That's exactly the kind of thoroughness that makes this partnership work," he replied, though something in his tone felt different. Elena had learned to read the subtle shifts in Marcus's voice over their years of working together, and today there was an undercurrent she couldn't quite identify. The elevator opened into the sophisticated reception area of Webb and Martinez Law, where their logo was etched into frosted glass behind the reception desk. The space was designed to impress, with leather seating, original artwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the area with natural light. Elena had insisted on including her grandmother's antique law books in a prominent display case, a small reminder of the immigrant woman who had cleaned office buildings at night to send Elena's mother to school in America. As they walked toward their respective offices, Elena's mind drifted to the journey that had brought her here. While Marcus had enjoyed the privilege of legacy admissions to Harvard Law School, family connections that opened doors, and a trust fund that eliminated financial stress, Elena's path had been carved through determination and sacrifice. She had worked 3 jobs while attending law school at night, studying by fluorescent lights in empty office buildings where she cleaned to pay her tuition. Her parents had immigrated from El Salvador when she was 5, carrying nothing but hope and an unwavering belief in education as the path to a better life. Elena's father had worked construction during the day and attended English classes at night, while her mother cleaned houses and took in sewing work. They had saved every dollar they could, living in a cramped apartment above a corner grocery store, so that Elena could focus on her studies without the crushing debt that burdened so many of her classmates. The irony wasn't lost on Elena that she now shared a law firm with someone who represented everything her family had worked so hard to achieve. Yet Marcus often forgot that his advantages weren't universal. During their law school years at Harvard, where they had first met, Marcus would casually mention family vacations to Europe or weekend retreats at the family estate in the Hamptons, never seeming to notice Elena's silence during these conversations. Elena settled into her office, a spacious corner room with windows facing both north and east, giving her a panoramic view of the city she had conquered through sheer determination. Her diplomas hung on the wall behind her desk, including her law degree, but also her undergraduate degree in business administration, which she had earned summa cum laude while working full-time to support herself. The Hartwell Corporation files spread across her mahogany desk told the story of 6 months of intensive negotiation, research, and legal maneuvering. The Hartwell merger was Elena's masterpiece, a $50 million acquisition deal that would combine two major pharmaceutical companies and create thousands of jobs while advancing critical medical research. Elena had personally handled every aspect of the negotiation, from the initial due diligence to the complex regulatory approvals required by the FDA. She had spent countless hours in conference rooms, mediating between executives, accountants, and government officials, ensuring that every detail met the stringent requirements of federal law. Elena's secretary, Mrs. Chun, knocked softly on the door before entering with a steaming cup of coffee and the morning's correspondence. Mrs. Chun was a 62-year-old woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes who had worked as a legal secretary for over 30 years. She had joined the firm when Elena and Marcus first opened their doors, drawn by Elena's reputation for treating staff with respect and dignity rather than as invisible servants. The Hartwell executives will be arriving at 1:30 for the preliminary meeting, Mrs. Chin said, placing the coffee on Elena's desk with practiced efficiency. I've prepared the conference room with all the documents you requested, and catering will set up the lunch presentation at noon. Elena smiled gratefully. Thank you, Mrs. Chun. I don't know what I'd do without your organization. Did the courier service deliver the final contracts from Hartwell's legal team? They arrived 20 minutes ago, Mrs. Chun confirmed. I've placed them in the red folder on your desk. Mr. Webb requested copies as well, so I had duplicates made for his review. Elena paused, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Marcus had requested copies of the contracts? That was unusual, considering he had left most of the Hartwell negotiations to Elena while he focused on their other corporate clients. During their partnership, they had developed a natural division of labor based on their individual strengths and interests. Elena excelled at complex merger and acquisition work, while Marcus preferred the more social aspects of client development and business networking. At 11:30, Elena gathered her materials and headed toward the large conference room where the Hartwell signing would take place. The room was impressive, with a polished granite table that could seat 20 people, state-of-the-art audiovisual equipment, and original oil paintings that depicted scenes of American industry and commerce. Elena had personally selected those paintings, believing they represented the entrepreneurial spirit that drove the clients they served. As she entered the conference room, Elena found Marcus already there, standing at the head of the table with the Hartwell contracts spread before him. He was speaking on his phone, his voice carrying the confident tone he used when discussing major deals with other attorneys or potential clients. That's right, Marcus was saying into his phone. The Webb firm has been handling this merger from the beginning. We've navigated some extremely complex regulatory issues, and I'm confident that today's signing will proceed without any complications. Elena stopped in the doorway, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Marcus continued his conversation, seemingly unaware of her presence. Of course, I had excellent research support from my associate, Marcus continued. But the strategic decisions and client relationship management have been under my direct supervision throughout the entire process. This kind of high-stakes negotiation requires the senior partner's personal attention. Elena's mind reeled as she processed what she was hearing. Research support? Associate? She was an equal partner in this firm, not Marcus's subordinate, and the Hartwell deal had been entirely her creation from the first client meeting to the final contract review. Every strategic decision, every negotiation point, every solution to the complex regulatory challenges had come from her legal expertise and tireless effort. Marcus ended his phone call and turned toward Elena with his characteristic confident smile. Elena, perfect timing. I was just updating the partners at Morrison Klein about our Hartwell success. They're quite impressed with the scope of the deal. Morrison Klein was one of the most prestigious law firms in the city, known for representing Fortune 500 corporations and maintaining a client roster that read like a who's who of American business. Elena knew that Marcus had been cultivating a relationship with their senior partners for months, attending their networking events and golf outings, though she had assumed it was simply part of his general business development efforts. I wanted to discuss the presentation for this afternoon, Elena said carefully, choosing her words with the precision she used in legal documents. I think it's important that we clearly communicate to the Hartwell executives exactly how we've structured this deal and what our ongoing role will be in the implementation phase. Marcus nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. I've prepared a comprehensive overview that will walk them through the key decision points and strategic considerations. Don't worry about the presentation details, Elena. I'll handle the client communication while you focus on ensuring all the documentation is in order. Elena felt her professional composure beginning to crack. She had spent 6 months building a relationship with the Hartwell executives, learning their business objectives, understanding their company culture, and crafting solutions that addressed their specific needs. The idea that Marcus would now position himself as the primary relationship manager felt like a betrayal of everything their partnership was supposed to represent. Marcus, Elena said, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. I think there might be some confusion about the division of responsibilities on this deal. I've been the primary contact for Hartwell since our initial meeting in March, and I've handled all aspects of the negotiation and documentation. Marcus's expression didn't change, but Elena noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. Of course, Elena, your contribution has been invaluable, but as we move into the implementation phase, it's important that our clients see the senior partnership taking direct responsibility for major deals like this one. It's about maintaining the firm's reputation for high-level service. The word contribution stung Elena like a physical blow. Her work on the Hartwell merger hadn't been a contribution to someone else's deal. It had been her deal from conception to completion. She had identified Hartwell as a potential client, researched their business challenges, developed the merger strategy that brought them to the negotiating table, and spent months crafting the legal framework that would make their acquisition possible. Elena excused herself from the conference room and returned to her office, closing the door behind her with perhaps more force than necessary. She sat at her desk and opened the red folder containing the final Hartwell contracts, but the words blurred on the page as her mind raced through the implications of what had just occurred. Was this an isolated incident, or part of a larger pattern she had failed to recognize? She thought back over recent months, remembering other occasions when Marcus had seemed to take credit for work that had originated in her office. The Patterson Industries contract that she had negotiated, which Marcus had presented to their monthly partners meeting as an example of his business development success. The regulatory approval for the Chun manufacturing expansion, which Elena had shepherded through months of bureaucratic challenges, only to see Marcus accept congratulations from their colleagues as if he had personally resolved the issues. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from Mrs. Chun. Mr. Webb's assistant called asking for all your correspondence files on the Hartwell matter. Should I provide them? Elena stared at the message, feeling pieces of a puzzle beginning to fall into place. Why would Marcus need her correspondence files unless he was planning to present himself as the primary relationship manager? She typed back quickly. Please hold those files until I can review the request with Mr. Webb directly. As Elena sat in her office, surrounded by the evidence of her hard work and professional achievements, she realized that something fundamental had shifted in her partnership with Marcus Webb. The respectful collaboration they had maintained for 5 years was being replaced by something else, something that felt calculated and deliberately deceptive. The Hartwell executives would arrive in 2 hours for what should have been Elena's moment of professional triumph. Instead, she found herself preparing for a confrontation that would test everything she believed about justice, integrity, and the value of honest work in a world where appearances sometimes mattered more than truth. The Hartwell signing had proceeded exactly as Elena had orchestrated it, with both pharmaceutical companies expressing satisfaction with the legal framework she had crafted over 6 months of intensive negotiation. However, as the executives left the Webb and Martinez conference room that afternoon, Elena couldn't shake the disturbing memory of Marcus introducing himself to the Hartwell CEO as the lead attorney on the merger, while referring to Elena as his capable associate who had provided excellent support throughout the process. 3 days later, Marcus requested a private meeting in his office, claiming he needed to discuss some important firm business that required Elena's immediate attention. Elena arrived at Marcus's office precisely at 9 in the morning, carrying her coffee and expecting to review their upcoming case schedules or discuss new client prospects. Instead, She found Marcus seated behind his massive oak desk with two manila folders positioned prominently before him, his expression serious in a way she had rarely seen during their 5-year partnership. "Elena," Marcus began without his usual pleasantries, "I've been doing some serious thinking about the direction of our firm and how we can best position ourselves for the next phase of growth. I've had some discussions with business advisors and legal consultants about optimizing our partnership structure for maximum efficiency and profitability." Elena settled into the leather chair across from Marcus's desk, noting the formal tone that seemed designed to create distance between them. She had always prided herself on reading people accurately, a skill that served her well in negotiating complex business deals, and every instinct told her that Marcus was building towards something significant and potentially threatening. Marcus opened one of the manila folders and withdrew a thick document bound in navy blue covers with gold lettering that read Partnership Restructuring Agreement in elegant script. He slid the document across the polished desktop toward Elena with the careful precision of someone presenting evidence in a courtroom. "I've had our corporate attorney draft a new partnership agreement that reflects the current realities of our business model and the different roles we each play in the firm's success," Marcus continued, his voice maintaining the same measured tone he used when delivering difficult news to clients. "After careful analysis of our billing records, client relationships, and business development activities, it's become clear that we need a structure that more accurately reflects our respective contributions." Elena opened the document and immediately felt her stomach drop as she scanned the first page. The proposed agreement would restructure Webb and Martinez Law to reduce her equity stake from 50% to 15%, while simultaneously designating Marcus as the senior managing partner with authority over all major business decisions, client relationships, and strategic planning for the firm. "Marcus," Elena said slowly, her voice carefully controlled despite the shock she felt, "this agreement would fundamentally change our entire partnership. We established this firm as equal partners with equal equity and shared decision-making authority. This document essentially makes me a junior associate in my own firm." Marcus leaned back in his chair with an expression of patient understanding, as if he were explaining a complex legal concept to a client who lacked the sophistication to grasp its implications. "Elena, I understand this might feel like a significant change, but we need to be realistic about how our firm actually operates. The major client relationships, the business development, the strategic partnerships with other firms, these all flow through my connections and my reputation in the legal community." Elena felt her professional composure being tested in a way it never had been before. She thought about the countless hours she had spent building relationships with clients, the late nights crafting legal strategies, the weekends she had sacrificed to ensure their firm's success. The suggestion that her contributions were somehow secondary to Marcus's networking abilities felt like a fundamental betrayal of everything their partnership had represented. Marcus continued his explanation, seemingly oblivious to Elena's growing anger. "The new structure would actually benefit you in the long run because it creates clear accountability and allows you to focus on what you do best, which is the detailed legal work and research that supports our client services. You'd have more time for the technical aspects of practice while I handle the business development and client management responsibilities." Elena closed the partnership agreement and placed it carefully on Marcus's desk, buying herself time to process the full implications of what was being proposed. This wasn't just a restructuring of their business relationship. It was a systematic attempt to diminish her role and reduce her to a subordinate position in the firm she had helped create from nothing. "I need time to review this with my own attorney before I can consider signing anything," Elena said, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt. "This represents a fundamental change to our original partnership agreement, and I want to ensure I understand all the legal and financial implications." Marcus's expression hardened almost imperceptibly, a subtle shift that Elena recognized from the negotiation table when he encountered resistance from opposing counsel. "Of course, take the time you need. But I should mention that I've already had preliminary discussions with 3 other potential partners who would be interested in joining the firm under this new structure. If you're not comfortable with the arrangement, we could explore other options for restructuring our professional relationship." The threat was delivered with Marcus's characteristic smooth charm, but Elena heard it clearly. accept the reduced role, or face the dissolution of everything she had worked to build. She understood now that this wasn't a negotiation. It was an ultimatum disguised as a business proposal. Elena returned to her office and immediately called David Chun, her personal attorney and the husband of her secretary, Mrs. Chun. David had handled the original partnership agreement when she and Marcus first established their firm, and Elena trusted his judgment implicitly. She arranged to meet him for lunch at a small restaurant several blocks away from the office, where they could discuss the situation without risk of being overheard by Marcus or anyone else at the firm. Over lunch, David reviewed the proposed partnership agreement with the careful attention he brought to all legal documents. His expression grew increasingly concerned as he read through the various clauses and provisions that would effectively strip Elena of her decision-making authority and reduce her financial stake in the business she had helped build. "Elena," David said finally, setting the document aside and meeting her eyes directly, "this agreement is designed to force you out of your own firm. The equity reduction alone would cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in future earnings, and the operational control provisions would make it impossible for you to influence any major business decisions." David explained that the agreement included clauses that would give Marcus unilateral authority to approve or deny Elena's client relationships, control her access to firm resources, and even determine her annual compensation based on his subjective evaluation of her contributions. It was, David concluded, a legal framework for systematic marginalization disguised as business optimization. That afternoon, Elena returned to the office with a new perspective on her partnership with Marcus Webb. She began paying closer attention to details she had previously overlooked, patterns of behavior that now seemed calculated rather than coincidental. When Mrs. Chun mentioned that Marcus's assistant had been requesting copies of Elena's billing records and client correspondence files, Elena realized that Marcus had been preparing for this restructuring for months. Elena decided to conduct her own investigation into the firm's operations. She stayed late that evening, after Marcus and the other staff had left the office, to review the billing records and financial statements that she had been too busy with client work to examine closely in recent months. What she discovered made her stomach turn with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Multiple clients who had worked primarily with Elena were being billed under Marcus's name and billing code. The Patterson Industries contract, which Elena had negotiated entirely on her own, showed Marcus as the primary attorney with Elena listed as an associate providing research support. The Chun manufacturing regulatory approval, which had required Elena to spend weeks navigating federal bureaucracy, was billed as Marcus's work, with Elena receiving credit for only 12 hours of document review. The pattern was systematic and extensive. Over the past 18 months, Marcus had been gradually transferring credit for Elena's work to his own billing records, creating a paper trail that would support his narrative about their respective contributions to the firm's success. Elena realized that Marcus hadn't simply decided to restructure their partnership. He had been planning this takeover for more than a year, methodically building a case for her reduced role, while she had been too focused on client service to notice the manipulation. Elena photographed the billing records with her phone and made copies of the most egregious examples of Marcus's credit appropriation. She also printed copies of email exchanges between herself and clients, documenting her direct relationships and the work she had performed on their behalf. If Marcus wanted to challenge her contributions to the firm's success, she would be prepared with evidence of exactly how much value she had created. The next morning, Elena received a call that crystallized her understanding of Marcus's strategy. Mrs. Patterson from Patterson Industries called Elena directly, expressing confusion about why she had been told that Marcus would now be handling all future legal matters for her company. "Mrs. Martinez," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice clearly concerned, "I received a call yesterday from Mr. Webb informing me that he would be taking over our account moving forward. I was under the impression that you were our primary attorney. You've handled every aspect of our legal needs for the past 2 years, and frankly, I'm not comfortable with this change without understanding the reasoning behind it." Elena felt her anger building as she realized that Marcus was already implementing his takeover strategy, even before she had agreed to sign the new partnership agreement. He was unilaterally reassigning her clients to himself, creating facts on the ground that would support his narrative about being the primary relationship manager for the firm's major accounts. Mrs. Patterson, Elena said carefully, I want to assure you that there hasn't been any change in my commitment to serving your legal needs. I believe there may have been some miscommunication about our internal responsibilities, and I'll clarify the situation with Mr. Webb immediately. After ending the call with Mrs. Patterson, Elena walked directly to Marcus's office and knocked firmly on his door. Marcus looked up from his computer with an expression of mild surprise, as if Elena's visit were unexpected rather than inevitable. Marcus, Elena said, closing the door behind her, I just received a concerning call from Mrs. Patterson. She said you contacted her about taking over her account. We haven't discussed any reassignment of my clients, and I'm confused about why you would contact them directly without speaking to me first. Marcus's expression remained calm, but Elena noticed a slight tension in his posture that suggested he had been expecting this confrontation. Elena, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. As we transition to the new partnership structure, it makes sense to ensure that our major clients have direct access to senior partnership oversight. I was simply introducing myself as an additional resource for Mrs. Patterson's account. Elena felt her professional composure reaching its breaking point. The gaslighting was so blatant and condescending that she wondered how she had failed to recognize Marcus's manipulative tendencies during their previous years of partnership. He was rewriting history in real time, presenting his client theft as customer service enhancement. Marcus, Elena said, her voice steady despite her anger, Mrs. Patterson specifically told me that you informed her you would be taking over her account. That's not providing additional resources. That's reassigning her legal representation without my knowledge or consent. Marcus stood up from his desk and walked to the window overlooking the financial district, his hands clasped behind his back in a pose that Elena recognized as his courtroom stance when delivering closing arguments. Elena, I think we need to have a frank conversation about the future of this firm and your place in it. He turned back toward Elena with an expression that combined false sympathy with unmistakable resolve. I've been trying to handle this transition diplomatically, but perhaps it's time for more direct communication. The legal market has become increasingly competitive, and our firm needs to adapt or risk being left behind by more agile competitors. Marcus returned to his desk and opened the second manila folder Elena had noticed during their meeting the previous day. From it, he withdrew a single sheet of paper with letterhead from one of the city's most prestigious business valuation firms. The document was addressed to Marcus personally and contained an assessment of Webb and Martinez Law's current market value and projected future earnings. I've had the firm independently appraised, Marcus continued, sliding the valuation report toward Elena. Based on current client relationships, revenue projections, and market positioning, your 50% stake is worth approximately $400,000. However, given the disruption that a partnership dissolution would cause to our client relationships and ongoing cases, I'm prepared to offer you $200,000 for a clean buyout of your interest. Elena stared at the buyout offer, understanding that this was Marcus's endgame. He hadn't brought her the restructuring agreement as a genuine partnership proposal. He had presented it as the lesser of two evils, with the alternative being forced out of her own firm entirely. The offer represents 6 months' salary, Marcus added, his tone suggesting that he considered this a generous proposal rather than an insulting lowball bid. It would give you the financial cushion to establish your own practice or join another firm without the complexities of unwinding our current partnership obligations. Elena looked up from the buyout offer and met Marcus's eyes directly, seeing him clearly for the first time in their 5-year relationship. This wasn't the collaborative partner who had worked alongside her to build a successful practice. This was a calculating opportunist who had been planning her elimination while benefiting from her expertise and hard work. Marcus, Elena said quietly, I built this firm just as much as you did. I've generated millions of dollars in revenue, maintained relationships with major clients, and sacrificed years of my life to create what we have today. $200,000 isn't a buyout offer. It's an insult disguised as a business transaction. Marcus's expression hardened completely, dropping the pretense of diplomatic partnership discussion. Elena, you need to be realistic about your options here. You can accept the buyout and leave with your reputation intact, or you can force me to dissolve the partnership entirely. If we go that route, I can guarantee that every major client will follow the senior partner who has the established relationships and business development network. Elena stood up from her chair, recognizing that any further discussion would be pointless. Marcus had clearly made his decision, and no amount of reasoning or legal argument would change his determination to force her out of their firm. I'll need time to consider your offer, Elena said, though she had already decided that she would never accept Marcus's terms. I'll give you my answer by the end of the week. Marcus nodded with the satisfied expression of someone who believed he had successfully maneuvered his opponent into an impossible position. Take all the time you need, Elena. I think you'll find that this arrangement serves both of our long-term interests. As Elena left Marcus's office, she heard him already dialing his phone. She paused in the hallway outside his door, close enough to hear his conversation through the thin walls. She'll be gone by month's end, Marcus was saying to whoever had answered his call. The buyout offer will force her hand, and once she's out, we can bring in the Patterson team and expand our corporate practice without any complications. Elena continued walking toward her office, but Marcus's words echoed in her mind. Month's end. He was so confident in his strategy that he was already announcing her departure to colleagues or potential partners. The arrogance of his assumption that she would simply accept defeat and disappear quietly revealed just how little Marcus actually understood the woman he had underestimated for the past 5 years. Elena Martinez had not worked her way through law school, built a successful practice, and earned the respect of major corporate clients by accepting other people's limitations on her potential. Marcus Webb was about to learn that his careful manipulation and strategic positioning had been observed, documented, and would be answered with the same meticulous attention to detail that Elena brought to every professional challenge she faced. Friday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that often accompanies moments of decisive action. Elena Martinez sat in the Webb and Martinez conference room, surrounded by the marble and mahogany that had once represented her professional dreams, preparing to sign documents that would officially end her partnership with Marcus Webb. The buyout agreement lay before her, its navy blue binding looking deceptively innocent for a document that Marcus believed would eliminate his most significant obstacle to complete control of their firm. Marcus had arranged for 2 junior partners from his networking circle to witness the signing, creating what he clearly intended as a formal ceremony to mark Elena's departure from the legal practice she had helped build. The witnesses were Richard Sterling and James Morrison, both Harvard Law graduates from Marcus's social circle who had recently joined the firm as equity partners under the new structure Marcus was implementing. Elena picked up her Mont Blanc pen, the same one she had used to sign the original partnership agreement 5 years earlier when she and Marcus had been genuine collaborators with shared vision for their legal practice. She paused for a moment, meeting Marcus's eyes across the conference table, noting the barely concealed satisfaction in his expression as he anticipated his complete victory over the immigrant woman who had dared to consider herself his equal. With deliberate precision, Elena signed her name to the buyout agreement, officially relinquishing her 50% stake in Webb and Martinez Law for the insulting sum of $200,000. Marcus's smile broadened as he witnessed her signature, clearly interpreting her compliance as evidence that his strategy of systematic intimidation and financial pressure had succeeded in forcing her submission to his will. Excellent, Marcus said, extending his hand across the table in a gesture that struck Elena as performatively magnanimous. Elena, I want you to know that I genuinely appreciate everything you've contributed to this firm over the years. You should feel proud of what we built together, and I'm confident that this transition will benefit both of our professional futures. Elena shook Marcus's hand briefly, noting the soft texture that revealed his privileged background, so different from her own hands that bore the subtle calluses from years of working multiple jobs while pursuing her education. Thank you, Marcus, she replied evenly. I'm sure this will work out exactly as it should for everyone involved. Richard Sterling cleared his throat and addressed Elena with the condescending tone she had grown accustomed to hearing from Marcus's associates. Ms. Martinez, I hope you understand that this restructuring isn't personal. It's simply a business decision designed to optimize our firm's competitive position in an increasingly challenging legal market. Elena nodded politely, suppressing her urge to educate Mr. Sterling about the actual competitive dynamics of their legal practice and his own minimal contributions to the firm's success since joining 3 months earlier. Of course, Mr. Sterling, I completely understand the business rationale behind these decisions. After the witnesses had departed, Marcus leaned back in his chair with the relaxed posture of someone who had successfully navigated a complex negotiation to achieve his desired outcome. He opened a manila folder and withdrew a detailed business plan that Elena recognized as the expansion strategy he had been developing while systematically undermining her position in their partnership. Now that we've resolved the ownership structure, Marcus said enthusiastically, I can finally move forward with some exciting opportunities that have been developing over the past few months. Morrison, Klein & Associates has approached me about a potential merger that would give us access to their Fortune 500 client base and establish us as a major player in the corporate legal market. Marcus spread architectural drawings across the conference table, revealing plans for expanding their current office space to include additional conference rooms, associate attorney offices, and a client hospitality area that would rival the most prestigious firms in the financial district. The expansion would triple their current square footage and transform Webb and Martinez into the kind of institution that Marcus had always envisioned himself leading. Elena studied the architectural plans with the same careful attention she brought to contract analysis, noting the elimination of her current office space and the creation of a senior partner suite that would occupy the entire northeast corner of the building. Marcus had clearly been planning this expansion for months, while simultaneously orchestrating her removal from the partnership, demonstrating a level of calculated deception that impressed Elena with its thoroughness. Marcus, Elena said thoughtfully, these plans are quite ambitious. You'll need significant capital investment to fund this kind of expansion, and the increased overhead will require substantial revenue growth to maintain profitability. Marcus waved dismissively, his confidence buoyed by his successful elimination of Elena's equity stake. The Morrison merger will provide the financial backing we need, and once we establish ourselves as their preferred legal partner for complex corporate transactions, the revenue projections become very attractive. Without the complications of dual ownership, I can move much more quickly on strategic decisions. Elena nodded with apparent understanding, though she was carefully noting every detail of Marcus's expansion plans for future reference. It sounds like you've thought through all the implications quite thoroughly. I'm sure you'll be very successful with this new direction for the firm. Marcus began gathering the architectural drawings with the satisfied efficiency of someone who had accomplished a difficult but necessary task. Elena, I want you to know that if you need any references or recommendations as you explore other opportunities, I'd be happy to provide them. Despite our differences about the firm's direction, I genuinely respect your legal skills and work ethic. Elena almost smiled at Marcus's transparent attempt to position himself as magnanimous in victory, offering to help the partner he had just systematically cheated out of her own firm. Thank you, Marcus. That's very generous of you to offer. As Elena gathered her personal belongings from her office later that afternoon, she reflected on the conversation she had initiated with David Chun 3 months earlier, immediately after Marcus's first attempt to marginalize her role in the Hartwell merger. While Marcus had been planning her elimination, Elena had been conducting her own strategic preparation for exactly this outcome. Elena had not spent 5 years building a successful legal practice only to surrender everything she had created because Marcus Webb underestimated her intelligence and determination. While he had been focused on manipulating their partnership agreement and stealing credit for her work, Elena had been quietly laying the foundation for her own independent practice, anticipating the inevitable confrontation that had culminated in today's forced buyout. 3 months earlier, Elena had incorporated Martinez Law LLC as a Delaware limited liability company, selecting a business structure that would provide maximum flexibility for rapid growth and strategic partnerships. She had retained David Chun as her corporate attorney and established business banking relationships with 2 different financial institutions to ensure adequate capital access for initial operations. Elena had also been discreetly communicating with their major clients about the deteriorating partnership dynamics at Webb and Martinez, though she had been careful to frame these conversations as general discussions about legal representation rather than direct solicitation of their business. Professional ethics required that she avoid actively recruiting clients away from her current firm, but nothing prevented her from being transparent about her own professional plans when clients initiated conversations about their legal needs. Mrs. Patterson from Patterson Industries had been particularly receptive to Elena's subtle communications about her future availability for legal representation. During their most recent conversation, Mrs. Patterson had expressed serious concerns about Marcus's sudden involvement in her company's legal matters, particularly given his unfamiliarity with the complex regulatory issues that Elena had been navigating on Patterson's behalf for the past 2 years. Elena, Mrs. Patterson had said during their confidential lunch meeting the previous week, "I need to be completely honest with you about something. Mr. Webb called me yesterday to discuss our upcoming contract negotiations with the City Planning Commission, and it became clear within 5 minutes that he doesn't understand the first thing about municipal regulatory compliance or the specific zoning issues we've been working through together." Elena had listened carefully as Mrs. Patterson described her growing frustration with Marcus's attempts to insert himself into legal matters he had never previously handled. The Patterson Industries account represented nearly $200,000 in annual legal fees, and Elena knew that losing their business would significantly impact Webb and Martinez's revenue projections for the following year. "Mrs. Patterson," Elena had replied thoughtfully, "I want to ensure that you receive the highest quality legal representation for your company's needs, regardless of which firm provides those services. If you ever have concerns about the continuity or quality of your legal counsel, I hope you'll feel comfortable discussing those issues directly with me." Elena had concluded similar conversations with 3 other major clients over the past month, establishing a foundation of trust and communication that would serve her well in her transition to independent practice. She had been careful to avoid any direct solicitation that might violate professional ethics rules, but she had made it clear that her commitment to their success would continue regardless of her formal business relationships. As Elena packed her personal files and reference materials into boxes marked for delivery to her new office, she reflected on the most satisfying aspect of her strategic preparation. While Marcus had been plotting her elimination from their shared practice, Elena had been securing office space directly across the street from their current building, in a renovated historic structure that offered the perfect combination of prestige and practical functionality for her new firm. The building Elena had selected was a beautifully restored 1920 structure with original hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows that provided panoramic views of the financial district. The space she had leased occupied the entire 4th floor, providing enough room for her own office, a conference room, offices for 2 associate attorneys, and administrative support staff. Elena had worked with an interior designer to create a space that reflected her personal aesthetic and professional values, emphasizing clean lines, natural materials, and artwork that celebrated the contributions of immigrant entrepreneurs to American business success. The design was both elegant and welcoming, creating an environment where clients would feel comfortable discussing their most sensitive business challenges. The building's most appealing feature, from Elena's perspective, was its location directly across the street from Webb and Martinez Law, ensuring that Marcus would have a daily visual reminder of the competition he had created through his arrogant assumption that Elena would simply disappear after accepting his buyout offer. Elena had also hired Mrs. Chen's daughter, Linda Chun, as her office manager and administrative coordinator. Linda was a recent graduate of the University of Pennsylvania's business program with a concentration in operations management, and Elena looked forward to working with someone who shared her family's values of hard work, integrity, and commitment to excellence. Monday morning brought the first test of Elena's strategic preparation. She arrived at her new office at 7:30, 2 hours before Marcus typically began his workday, to ensure that everything was prepared for what she anticipated would be an interesting day of telephone calls and client communications. Elena's new office space looked magnificent in the morning sunlight, with the natural light streaming through the large windows and reflecting off the polished hardwood floors. Her law degree and professional certifications were prominently displayed on the wall behind her desk, along with photographs from major client successes and a framed copy of the letter from the Hartwell Corporation thanking her personally for her excellent work on their merger. At 8:15, Elena received her first telephone call of the day. Mrs. Patterson's voice carried a mixture of relief and excitement that Elena found deeply satisfying after months of Marcus's manipulative behavior. "Elena," Mrs. Patterson began, "I'm calling to inform you that Patterson Industries is terminating our relationship with Webb and Martinez Law, effective immediately. After our conversation last week and Mr. Webb's complete unfamiliarity with our regulatory challenges, our board of directors has decided that we need legal representation from someone who actually understands our business." Elena smiled as she looked out her window toward the building across the street where Marcus was probably just arriving at his office, completely unaware that his first major client defection was already in progress. "Mrs. Patterson, I want to thank you for your confidence in my legal capabilities. I'm prepared to provide Patterson Industries with the same level of dedicated representation you've received, and I'm confident that the transition will be seamless." Mrs. Patterson's call was followed within an hour by similar conversations with 3 other major clients who had decided to follow Elena to her new practice rather than remain with Marcus and his unfamiliar approach to their legal needs. Elena carefully documented each client transition, ensuring that all ethical requirements were met and that no confidential information from Webb and Martinez was inappropriately transferred to her new practice. By 10:30 Monday morning, Elena had confirmed that approximately 60% of Webb and Martinez's major client accounts would be transitioning to Martinez Law within the next 30 days. The revenue impact would be devastating for Marcus's expansion plans and would likely force him to reconsider his arrangement with Morrison, Klein & Associates. Elena was reviewing client files when Linda Chen knocked on her office door to announce that she had a visitor in the reception area. Elena looked through the large windows of her office to see Marcus Webb standing in her reception area, his face flushed with anger and his usual composed demeanor replaced by obvious agitation. Elena walked to the reception area to greet Marcus, noting with satisfaction that he appeared to be struggling with the reality that his former partner had not simply disappeared as he had confidently predicted to his colleagues. Marcus was dressed in his most expensive suit, clearly intending to project authority and control, but his agitated body language undermined the effect he was trying to create. "Marcus," Elena said pleasantly, "what a surprise to see you here. I hope you're finding the transition to sole ownership of Webb and Martinez as smooth as you anticipated." Marcus's jaw tightened as he struggled to maintain his composure in front of Linda Chun and the office staff, who were observing this confrontation with obvious interest. "Elena, we need to discuss the ethics violations involved in your solicitation of our clients. I've been contacted by 4 major accounts who claim they're terminating their relationships with our firm to follow you here." Elena gestured toward her private office, recognizing that this conversation required privacy for both professional and practical reasons. "Please, let's discuss this in my office where we can speak more freely." Marcus followed Elena into her office, his eyes taking in the elegant design and professional setup that clearly represented a significant investment in long-term business development. Elena noticed his expression shifting from anger to concern as he realized that her new practice was not the hastily assembled solo operation he had apparently expected. "Marcus," Elena said as she settled behind her desk, "I want to assure you that I've been scrupulously careful to avoid any ethics violations in my transition to independent practice. Every client who has contacted me about representation has initiated those conversations themselves, and I've made no direct solicitation of any Webb and Martinez clients." Marcus began pacing in front of Elena's desk with the agitated energy she recognized from his courtroom performances when he encountered unexpected opposition from opposing counsel. "Elena, you know perfectly well that your months of preparation for this practice represent deliberate interference with our client relationships. You've been planning this since our partnership discussions began." Elena leaned back in her chair, enjoying Marcus's obvious discomfort as he confronted the reality that his strategic manipulation had created a formidable competitor rather than eliminating his most capable rival. "Marcus, my preparation for independent practice began when you started taking credit for my work and billing clients for services I provided. I simply recognized the inevitability of our professional separation before you forced the issue." Marcus stopped pacing and turned to face Elena directly, his expression revealing the calculation that had driven his systematic campaign to force her out of their shared practice. "Elena, I'm prepared to discuss modifying our buyout agreement. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement that addresses both of our concerns about client transitions and competitive positioning." Elena smiled, recognizing that Marcus's offer represented his acknowledgement that his strategy had failed completely. "Marcus, I appreciate your willingness to discuss modifications, but I'm quite satisfied with our current arrangement. You have complete control of Webb and Martinez Law, exactly as you wanted, and I have the opportunity to build the kind of practice that reflects my own professional values." Marcus's confident facade finally cracked completely as he realized that Elena's strategic preparation had not only anticipated his manipulation, but had positioned her to benefit from his arrogance. The woman he had dismissed as a subordinate who would quietly accept whatever terms he offered had outmaneuvered him at every step of their confrontation. "Elena," Marcus said, his voice carrying a note of desperation that Elena found particularly satisfying. "You don't understand the damage this is causing to both of our reputations. The legal community is already talking about our partnership dissolution, and this kind of competitive conflict reflects poorly on everyone involved." Elena stood up from her desk and walked to the window overlooking the street that separated her new practice from the building where Marcus would soon be explaining to his remaining partners how he had managed to lose 60% of their major clients within a single morning. "Marcus, I think you'll find that the legal community is quite capable of distinguishing between ethical competition and the kind of manipulative behavior that led to our partnership dissolution." As Marcus left Elena's office, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Elena reflected on the poetic justice of his situation. The man who had spent months planning her professional destruction had succeeded only in creating his most knowledgeable and motivated competitor, positioned directly across the street, where his failures would be visible to him every single day. Elena looked at her appointment calendar for the afternoon and smiled as she noted 3 consultation meetings with prospective new clients who had heard about Martinez Law through word-of-mouth recommendations from her existing client base. By the end of her first week in business, Elena's calendar was already approaching the capacity that Marcus had confidently predicted would never materialize for a solo practitioner without his business development network and family connections. The gold lettering on Elena's office door read Martinez Law Ethical Representation, a subtle reminder to every visitor about the professional standards that had been abandoned at Webb and Martinez Law. Elena had chosen those words carefully, knowing that Marcus would see them every time he looked across the street from his own office window, a daily reminder of the integrity he had sacrificed in his pursuit of complete control over their shared practice. Tuesday morning brought Marcus Webb's first attempt at legal retaliation against Elena's successful transition to independent practice. Elena arrived at Martinez Law to find a certified letter waiting on her desk, delivered by a courier service at 7 o'clock that morning. The envelope bore the letterhead of Blackstone and Associates, one of the city's most aggressive litigation firms, known for representing clients who preferred intimidation tactics over substantive legal arguments. Elena opened the letter to find a formal cease and desist notice, claiming that her solicitation of Webb and Martinez clients violated the non-compete clause in their original partnership agreement and demanding immediate cessation of all competitive activities within the metropolitan area. The letter threatened civil litigation for tortious interference with business relationships and claimed damages in excess of $1 million for Elena's alleged violations of their contractual obligations. Elena reviewed the non-compete clause referenced in the cease and desist letter, consulting the original partnership agreement she had retained in her personal files. The relevant provision prohibited either partner from competing within a 50-mile radius of their shared practice for a period of 2 years following dissolution of the partnership. However, Elena's careful review revealed several critical defects in the enforcement mechanism that Marcus had apparently overlooked in his eagerness to intimidate her into submission. Elena immediately contacted David Chun, her personal attorney, to schedule an emergency consultation about Marcus's legal threats. David arrived at Elena's office within an hour, bringing his own copy of the partnership agreement and a thick folder containing documentation that Elena realized would completely undermine Marcus's legal position. "Elena," David said as he spread documents across her conference table, "I've been anticipating this exact legal challenge since you first told me about Marcus's billing irregularities and credit appropriation. The non-compete clause he's trying to enforce is legally unenforceable due to his own material breaches of the partnership agreement. David explained that Marcus's systematic theft of credit for Elena's work, his unauthorized reassignment of her clients, and his manipulation of billing records constituted fundamental violations of their partnership agreement that voided any non-compete obligations. Under established legal precedent, a party who materially breaches a contract cannot enforce restrictive covenants against the other party, particularly when those breaches directly contributed to the partnership dissolution. Furthermore, David continued, the non-compete clause was written so broadly that it would effectively prevent you from practicing law anywhere in this metropolitan area, which makes it an unreasonable restraint on trade that no court would enforce. Marcus's attorneys should have recognized these deficiencies before sending such an aggressive demand letter. David advised Elena to respond to Marcus's legal threats with a comprehensive counter-notice documenting his contractual violations and threatening her own litigation for his systematic appropriation of her work product. Elena authorized David to prepare a response that would make clear her willingness to defend her right to practice law and her confidence in the legal strength of her position. That afternoon, Elena received a telephone call that provided dramatic confirmation of her strategic decision to leave Webb and Martinez Law. Mrs. Chun called Elena's office personally to inform her that Patterson Industries was not only terminating their relationship with Marcus's firm, but was also filing a formal complaint with the State Bar Association regarding his handling of their legal matters. Ms. Martinez, Mrs. Chun said, her voice carrying obvious frustration and disappointment, I need to tell you about what happened yesterday when Mr. Webb attempted to represent us in our zoning variance hearing with the City Planning Commission. He arrived completely unprepared, having apparently never reviewed the environmental impact assessments or the municipal code provisions that govern our industry. Mrs. Chun described a disastrous hearing in which Marcus had misrepresented Patterson Industries' compliance history, confused the applicable regulatory standards, and ultimately agreed to conditions that would cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars in unnecessary environmental remediation. The Planning Commission had expressed surprise at the dramatic decline in legal representation quality compared to Elena's previous appearances on Patterson's behalf. The worst part, Mrs. Chun continued, was that Mr. Webb seemed to think he could compensate for his lack of preparation with charm and confidence. He actually argued with the planning commissioners about their interpretation of regulations that he clearly had never read. It was embarrassing for everyone involved, including our company's reputation in the community. Elena listened with a mixture of professional sympathy for Mrs. Chin's frustration and personal satisfaction at the confirmation that Marcus's arrogance had led him to accept responsibility for legal matters he was completely unqualified to handle. Mrs. Chin's public criticism of Webb and Martinez Law would have significant impact on Marcus's reputation within their professional community, particularly given Patterson Industries' prominence in the local business community. Mrs. Chun concluded her call by informing Elena that Patterson Industries was directing their entire legal budget to Martinez Law, including several major matters that Marcus had been scheduled to handle over the next 6 months. The revenue transfer represented nearly $300,000 in annual legal fees, money that Marcus had confidently included in his expansion projections. Wednesday brought news that exceeded even Elena's optimistic expectations for her new practice. She received a call from Jonathan Hartwell, the CEO of Hartwell Corporation, requesting an urgent meeting to discuss their company's ongoing legal needs. Elena had wondered how the Hartwell executives would react to learning about the partnership dissolution, particularly given Marcus's attempt to position himself as the lead attorney on their merger. Mr. Hartwell's assistant scheduled a lunch meeting for Thursday at the Hartwell corporate headquarters, a glass tower in the center of the financial district that represented one of the most prestigious client relationships in Elena's portfolio. Elena spent Wednesday evening reviewing all aspects of the Hartwell relationship, preparing for what she anticipated would be a crucial conversation about the future of their legal representation. Thursday's lunch meeting with Jonathan Hartwell provided Elena with the most satisfying validation of her decision to establish independent practice. Mr. Hartwell, a distinguished man in his early 60s with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to making important decisions, greeted Elena with obvious relief and enthusiasm. Ms. Martinez, Mr. Hartwell said as they settled into the executive dining room overlooking the city skyline. I have to tell you how concerned our board has been about the changes at Webb and Martinez Law. When Mr. Webb contacted us about restructuring our legal relationship, it became immediately clear that he had little understanding of the work you had performed on our merger or the ongoing compliance issues we're facing. Mr. Hartwell explained that Marcus had attempted to schedule a meeting to discuss Hartwell's future legal needs, apparently expecting to maintain the relationship despite Elena's departure from the firm. However, Marcus's unfamiliarity with the regulatory complexities of pharmaceutical mergers had become apparent within minutes of their conversation, leading the Hartwell board to question whether Webb and Martinez could continue providing adequate representation. Ms. Martinez, Mr. Hartwell continued, our board has authorized me to offer Martinez Law an exclusive retainer arrangement for all of Hartwell Corporation's legal needs. We believe that maintaining continuity in our legal representation is essential, particularly given the complex regulatory environment we're navigating in the pharmaceutical industry. Elena accepted Hartwell's retainer offer, which represented annual legal fees exceeding $500,000 and established Martinez Law as counsel for one of the region's most successful pharmaceutical companies. The Hartwell relationship would provide Elena with the financial stability to expand her practice and hire additional attorneys to handle the growing client demand. That evening, Elena received an unexpected telephone call from Amanda Morrison, a senior partner at Morrison, Klein & Associates who had been involved in Marcus's expansion discussions. Elena had met Amanda at several professional networking events and had always respected her reputation for ethical practice and business integrity. Elena, Amanda said without preamble, I'm calling to give you some information that I think you should know about. Marcus Webb approached our firm about a potential merger arrangement, and during our due diligence review, we discovered some irregularities in his billing records that raised serious concerns about his professional practices. Amanda explained that Morrison, Klein's financial analysis of Webb and Martinez Law had revealed the systematic credit appropriation that Elena had discovered in her own investigation. The discrepancies between Marcus's claimed contributions and the actual work performed had been so obvious that Morrison, Klein had terminated their merger discussions and reported their findings to the State Bar Association. Elena, Amanda continued, I want you to know that Morrison, Klein would be very interested in discussing a strategic partnership with Martinez Law. Your reputation for excellent work and ethical practice has been consistently recognized within our professional community, and we believe there could be significant synergies between our firms. Elena thanked Amanda for the information and agreed to schedule a meeting to explore potential collaboration opportunities. The prospect of a partnership with Morrison, Klein represented validation of Elena's strategic decision and confirmation that her professional reputation had not only survived Marcus's manipulation, but had been enhanced by contrast with his questionable practices. Friday morning brought the confrontation that Elena had been expecting since Marcus's legal threats earlier in the week. As Elena left her office building at 6:30 that evening, heading toward the parking garage beneath her building, she found Marcus waiting beside her car with an expression of barely controlled anger and desperation. Marcus was dressed in his most expensive suit, but his usual polished appearance was undermined by obvious signs of stress and fatigue. His hair was slightly disheveled, his tie was loosened, and his characteristic confident bearing had been replaced by the agitated energy of someone whose carefully constructed plans were disintegrating around him. Elena, Marcus said as she approached her car, we need to talk about the damage you're causing to both of our professional reputations. This competitive situation has gotten completely out of hand, and I think we need to find a way to resolve it before it destroys everything we both worked to build. Elena remained standing beside her car, noting the echo in the underground garage that would ensure their conversation carried to anyone else in the vicinity. She recognized that Marcus had chosen this location for its private atmosphere, though she doubted he had considered the acoustic properties that might work against his interests. Marcus, Elena replied calmly, I'm not sure what damage you're referring to. Martinez Law has been operating ethically and professionally since our opening, and our clients seem quite satisfied with the quality of representation they're receiving. Marcus began pacing in the narrow space between Elena's car and the concrete pillar beside it, his agitation becoming more obvious with each step. Elena, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've systematically destroyed my relationships with our major clients. You've interfered with my business development efforts, and you've created a competitive situation that's making it impossible for me to move forward with the expansion plans I've been developing for months. Elena listened to Marcus's accusations with the same careful attention she brought to opposing counsel's arguments in complex litigation, noting the revealing assumptions underlying his complaints. His use of possessive pronouns when referring to clients and business relationships demonstrated the same arrogant ownership mentality that had led to their partnership dissolution. Marcus, Elena said thoughtfully, I'm curious about your reference to your business development efforts and your relationships with major clients. Are you referring to the clients I brought to Webb and Martinez through my own professional networks and legal expertise? Or are you talking about the business relationships I developed through years of dedicated service and ethical representation? Marcus stopped pacing and turned to face Elena directly, his expression revealing the combination of anger and desperation that had been building throughout their confrontation. Elena, you're being deliberately obtuse about the situation we're facing. I've invested 5 years in building Webb and Martinez Law into a successful practice, and your competitive interference is threatening everything I've worked to achieve. Elena opened her briefcase and withdrew a manila folder containing documents she had been preparing since her investigation into Marcus's billing irregularities 3 months earlier. She had anticipated that Marcus would eventually attempt direct intimidation, and she had prepared accordingly with evidence that would demonstrate the futility of his threats. Marcus, Elena said as she opened the folder, I think there may be some confusion about who has been interfering with whom over the past several months. I've been documenting some interesting patterns in our firm's billing records and client communications that I think might clarify the situation for both of us. Elena showed Marcus copies of billing records that clearly demonstrated his systematic appropriation of credit for her work, including specific examples of clients who had worked exclusively with Elena but were billed under Marcus's name and billing code. She also provided copies of email communications showing Marcus's unauthorized redirection of her client correspondence to his own assistant. Elena continued presenting evidence with the methodical precision she used in complex litigation, showing Marcus documentation of his attempts to reassign her clients without authorization, his misrepresentation of his role in major cases, and his manipulation of financial records to support his narrative about their respective contributions to the firm's success. Marcus, Elena said as she closed the folder, I've also been in contact with several clients who have reported receiving bills for legal services that were performed primarily by me but attributed entirely to you. Patterson Industries has provided me with particularly detailed documentation of billing discrepancies that they've been questioning for several months. Marcus's expression shifted from anger to obvious concern as he realized that Elena's evidence would completely undermine any legal action he might attempt to pursue. The documentation she had gathered would not only defeat his non-compete claims, but could also support ethics violations and potential malpractice allegations against him. Furthermore, Elena continued, I've received calls from 3 different clients reporting that you've attempted to handle legal matters you're clearly unqualified to manage. Mrs. Chun has already filed a formal complaint with the State Bar Association regarding your performance in the Patterson Industries zoning hearing, and I understand that similar complaints are being prepared by other clients. Elena returned the documents to her briefcase and met Marcus's eyes directly, seeing the full realization of his situation reflected in his expression. Marcus, I want to be completely clear about something. I have no interest in destroying your career or your reputation, but I will not tolerate any further attempts to intimidate me or interfere with my right to practice law ethically and independently. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but Elena continued before he could speak. I've provided copies of all this documentation to my attorney, and I've prepared a comprehensive response to your cease and desist letter that details your contractual violations and professional misconduct. If you choose to pursue litigation against Martinez Law, you'll find that discovery will be quite enlightening for everyone involved. Elena walked around to the driver's side of her car, leaving Marcus standing beside the concrete pillar with his shoulders slumped in defeat. As she started her engine, she could see Marcus in her rearview mirror, still standing in the same spot, as if frozen by the realization that his strategy of intimidation and manipulation had not only failed, but had created evidence that could be used against him in any future legal proceedings. Elena drove out of the parking garage with a sense of satisfaction that came from thorough preparation meeting direct confrontation. She had spent months anticipating Marcus's inevitable attempt at retaliation, and her careful documentation had provided exactly the evidence needed to neutralize his threats and demonstrate the strength of her legal position. As Elena pulled into traffic heading toward her apartment, her cell phone rang with a call from David Chun. Elena answered using her hands-free system, expecting routine updates about their response to Marcus's legal threats. "Elena," David said, his voice carrying obvious satisfaction, "I just received a very interesting call from Marcus Webb's attorney. It seems that Mr. Webb has decided to withdraw his cease and desist demands and will not be pursuing any legal action against Martinez Law or your professional activities." David explained that Marcus's attorney had contacted him within an hour of Elena's confrontation in the parking garage, apparently after Marcus had reported the extent of Elena's documentation and the strength of her evidence. The attorney had indicated that Webb and Martinez Law would be focusing on their own business development rather than pursuing competitive litigation. David also informed Elena that he had received confirmation from the State Bar Association that they were opening a formal investigation into the ethics complaints filed against Marcus Webb. The investigation would examine his billing practices, client communication procedures, and professional competence in areas where he had claimed expertise. That same evening, Marcus returned to Webb and Martinez Law to find resignation letters on his desk from Richard Sterling and James Morrison, the two junior partners who had witnessed Elena's buyout agreement signing just 1 week earlier. Both attorneys cited concerns about the firm's direction and their desire to pursue opportunities with more established practices that could provide greater stability and professional development. Sterling's resignation letter was particularly damaging to Marcus's expansion plans, as he had been the primary contact with several corporate clients who were now questioning the firm's ability to provide consistent representation. Morrison's departure eliminated Marcus's connection to the family law practice that had been generating steady revenue while Elena was building the corporate client base. Marcus sat alone in his office late Friday evening, surrounded by architectural drawings for an expansion that would never happen and business plans that were now completely irrelevant to his firm's diminished circumstances. Through his window, he could see the lights in Elena's office across the street, where she was apparently working late to accommodate the growing demand for Martinez Law's services. The irony of Marcus's situation would have been amusing if it weren't so professionally devastating. His systematic campaign to eliminate Elena from their partnership had succeeded in removing her from Webb and Martinez Law, but it had also created his most knowledgeable competitor, positioned directly across the street where her success would be visible to him every day for years to come. Marcus's confidence in his business development abilities and professional networking had been completely undermined by the reality that clients valued competent legal representation more than social connections and family prestige. Elena's immigrant work ethic and genuine expertise had proven more valuable in building sustainable client relationships than Marcus's Harvard connections and country club memberships. As Marcus finally left his office that evening, walking past Elena's building where security guards nodded respectfully to the successful attorney whose reputation for ethical practice was already becoming legendary in their professional community, he realized that his arrogant assumptions about Elena's limitations had led him to create the exact competitive situation he had sought to avoid through his partnership manipulation. Monday morning arrived with the kind of devastating precision that characterizes bureaucratic justice. Marcus Webb opened the mail at Webb and Martinez Law to find an official envelope bearing the seal of the State Bar Association, its contents representing the formal beginning of his professional reckoning. The ethics investigation notice detailed multiple complaints filed against Marcus, including allegations of billing fraud, client misrepresentation, and gross negligence in legal representation. The document outlined a comprehensive investigation into Marcus's professional conduct over the past 18 months, focusing specifically on the Patterson Industries zoning hearing disaster. the systematic credit appropriation that had been documented by Elena and confirmed by Morrison, Klein and Associates, and additional complaints from 3 other clients who had discovered discrepancies in their legal bills after Elena's departure. Marcus read through the formal charges with growing horror as he realized that the State Bar had assembled a detailed case file that included billing records, client correspondence, and witness statements from Elena and several former clients. The investigation would examine his competence to practice law in areas where he had claimed expertise, his adherence to professional billing standards, and his compliance with ethical obligations to clients and business partners. The notice informed Marcus that he was required to respond to the allegations within 30 days and appear before a disciplinary panel for formal hearings that could result in sanctions ranging from professional censure to suspension or disbarment. The document also advised him to retain competent legal representation, as the charges were serious enough to potentially affect his ability to practice law in the state. Marcus was still processing the implications of the ethics investigation when his office phone rang with a call that would accelerate his firm's collapse. Mrs. Chun, his longtime secretary, was calling to inform him that she was submitting her resignation, effective immediately, to accept a position with Martinez Law as Elena's executive administrative assistant. "Mr. Webb," Mrs. Chun said with obvious relief in her voice, "I've been watching the situation at this firm deteriorate for months, and I can no longer work in an environment where clients are being billed for services they didn't receive and legal representation is being provided by attorneys who aren't qualified to handle complex matters." Mrs. Chun explained that she had been documenting Marcus's professional mistakes and ethical violations as they occurred, initially hoping that the problems were temporary oversights rather than systematic misconduct. However, Elena's investigation had confirmed her growing suspicions that Marcus had been deliberately misrepresenting his role in client matters while appropriating credit for work performed by his more qualified partner. Mrs. Chun continued with devastating specificity about Marcus's professional failures. "Mr. Webb, I've worked as a legal secretary for 35 years, and I've never seen anything as unprofessional as your handling of the Patterson Industries matter. You showed up to a crucial zoning hearing without having read the relevant regulations, and you agreed to conditions that will cost their company hundreds of thousands of dollars in unnecessary expenses." Mrs. Chin's resignation was followed within hours by similar calls from the firm's paralegal staff and junior associates, all of whom had witnessed Marcus's professional incompetence and decided they could not continue working for an attorney whose practices violated their own ethical standards. Elena had not actively recruited any of Webb and Martinez's staff, but her reputation for ethical practice had created opportunities for legal professionals who wanted to work in an environment that reflected their own values. Tuesday brought the call that Marcus had been dreading since Elena's departure 3 weeks earlier. Dr. Elizabeth Hartman, the chief executive officer of Hartman Medical Devices and the last remaining major client at Webb and Martinez Law, contacted Marcus personally to discuss terminating their legal relationship and transferring their substantial account to Martinez Law. "Mr. Webb," Dr. Hartman said with professional directness, "our board of directors met yesterday to review our legal representation needs, and we've decided that Hartman Medical Devices requires counsel with demonstrated expertise in FDA regulatory compliance and medical device patent law. Based on recent events, we no longer have confidence in your firm's ability to provide the specialized representation our company requires." Dr. Hartman's account represented annual legal fees exceeding $400,000, money that Marcus had already committed to his expansion plans and operational expenses. The loss of Hartman Medical Devices would eliminate nearly 70% of Webb and Martinez's remaining revenue stream, making it impossible for Marcus to maintain his current office space or pay the salaries of his remaining staff. Marcus attempted to convince Dr. Hartman to reconsider her decision, emphasizing his years of experience and offering reduced rates for continued representation. However, Dr. Hartman politely but firmly explained that her company's legal needs required the kind of specialized expertise that Elena had consistently demonstrated, but that Marcus had never developed despite his claims to the contrary. Furthermore, Dr. Hartman added, "We've learned about the ethics investigation that's currently pending against you, and our board feels that continuing our relationship would create unnecessary risk exposure for our company. We need legal counsel whose professional standing is unquestionable, particularly given the regulatory environment in the medical device industry. Wednesday morning brought a cash flow crisis that forced Marcus to confront the financial reality of his situation. Webb and Martinez Law owed nearly $200,000 in advance fees and retainers to former clients who had terminated their relationships and demanded refunds of unused portions of their prepaid legal services. However, Marcus had already spent most of these funds on his expansion plans and operational expenses, leaving the firm without sufficient liquid assets to meet its refund obligations. Marcus contacted his business bank to discuss emergency financing options, but the loan officer informed him that the pending ethics investigation and recent client departures made Webb and Martinez Law an unacceptable credit risk. The bank would not extend additional credit to a law firm facing potential disciplinary sanctions and dramatic revenue reductions. Marcus was forced to contact his clients personally to explain that their refund requests would be processed over several months rather than immediately, a situation that generated additional complaints to the State Bar Association and further damaged his already deteriorating professional reputation. That same afternoon, Marcus received a call that illustrated the complete reversal of fortune that had occurred since Elena's departure from their partnership. Elena contacted him personally to inform him that Morrison, Klein & Associates had offered Martinez Law a strategic partnership that would create one of the largest and most respected legal practices in the metropolitan area. Marcus, Elena said with professional courtesy that somehow made the news even more devastating. I wanted to let you know that I'll be announcing the Martinez Law partnership with Morrison, Klein next week. The arrangement will allow us to expand our services to include areas of practice that complement our existing client relationships. Elena explained that the Morrison, Klein partnership would provide Martinez Law with access to a prestigious client base and additional practice areas, while offering Morrison, Klein the benefit of Elena's expertise in complex corporate transactions and her reputation for ethical representation. The combined firm would employ over 50 attorneys and maintain offices in 3 different cities. Marcus listened to Elena's success with the bitter recognition that she was achieving the kind of professional expansion he had planned for Webb and Martinez Law before his arrogant manipulation had destroyed their partnership. The Morrison-Klein arrangement represented exactly the type of strategic opportunity that Marcus had believed would naturally flow to him based on his family connections and social network. Elena concluded their conversation by mentioning that the new partnership would be seeking experienced legal support staff and offering competitive compensation packages for qualified professionals. Marcus understood that Elena was subtly informing him that his remaining employees would have opportunities to join a successful and ethically managed practice if they chose to leave Webb and Martinez Law. Thursday brought Marcus's discovery of a legal complication that he had never anticipated during his campaign to force Elena out of their partnership. While attempting to sell some of the firm's assets to generate cash for client refunds, Marcus learned that Elena retained legal ownership rights to approximately half of their client relationships under the terms of their original partnership agreement. Marcus had assumed that forcing Elena to accept a buyout would give him complete control over all aspects of their shared practice, including full ownership of client relationships and business assets. However, his attorney informed him that Elena's departure did not automatically transfer her ownership rights in client relationships she had developed independently before and during their partnership. Elena had been meticulous in documenting her role in developing client relationships, maintaining copies of initial contact records, contract negotiations, and ongoing correspondence that established her as the primary attorney for the majority of their former shared clients. Under partnership law, these relationships represented valuable business assets that could not be unilaterally appropriated by the remaining partner. Marcus realized that Elena's strategic preparation had extended far beyond simply establishing her own practice. She had also preserved her legal rights to the business relationships she had created, effectively preventing him from selling or transferring assets that represented the most valuable components of Webb and Martinez Law. Friday brought the news that Marcus had been dreading since the ethics investigation began 3 weeks earlier. The State Bar disciplinary panel had scheduled formal hearings for the following month, and had issued a preliminary recommendation for a 6-month suspension of Marcus's license to practice law, pending the outcome of their investigation into his professional conduct. The preliminary suspension recommendation was based on the panel's finding that Marcus posed an immediate risk to client welfare due to his demonstrated incompetence in areas where he had claimed expertise and his systematic violation of billing and client communication standards. The suspension would take effect immediately, preventing Marcus from representing clients or operating Webb and Martinez Law until the disciplinary process was completed. Marcus contacted Elena one final time, hoping to discuss some kind of arrangement that might allow him to salvage his professional career and avoid complete financial ruin. However, Elena's response was professionally cordial but definitively final. "Marcus, I think the best course for both of us is to allow the appropriate professional and legal processes to reach their natural conclusions. I wish you the best in resolving your current challenges." Marcus sat alone in the empty offices of Webb and Martinez Law that evening, surrounded by the remnants of the practice he had destroyed through his arrogant assumption that Elena's expertise and client relationships could be appropriated without consequence. The architectural drawings for his planned expansion lay scattered across his desk like monuments to his miscalculation of Elena's strategic capabilities and professional resources. Through his office window, Marcus could see the lights blazing in Elena's offices across the street, where Martinez Law was working late to accommodate the growing demand from clients who valued ethical representation and demonstrated competence over social connections and family prestige. Elena had built something authentic and sustainable, while Marcus had pursued an illusion of control that had ultimately consumed everything he thought he owned. The irony of Marcus's situation was complete and devastating. His systematic campaign to eliminate Elena as a competitive threat had succeeded in removing her from Webb and Martinez Law, but it had also created the circumstances that would destroy his own career and establish Elena as one of the most respected attorneys in their professional community. As Marcus finally turned off the lights in his office for what he knew would be the last time, he reflected on the fundamental miscalculation that had led to his professional destruction. He had assumed that Elena's immigrant background and lack of family connections made her vulnerable to his manipulation, but he had failed to understand that her success was built on authentic competence and genuine client relationships rather than the inherited advantages that had carried him through law school and into partnership with someone far more qualified than himself. 18 months later, Webb and Martinez Law officially closed its doors forever, unable to continue operations after Marcus's license suspension became permanent following the conclusion of his disciplinary hearings. Elena Martinez, meanwhile, had established Martinez Law as the premier corporate legal practice in the metropolitan area, known throughout the professional community for ethical representation and genuine expertise in complex business transactions. 2 years after the collapse of Webb and Martinez Law, Elena Martinez stood at the podium of the Metropolitan Bar Association's annual awards ceremony, holding the crystal plaque that recognized her receipt of the Distinguished Service Award for Integrity in Professional Practice. The ballroom was filled with judges, senior partners from prestigious firms, and legal professionals who had gathered to celebrate excellence in the practice of law. Elena's acceptance speech was brief but powerful, emphasizing the fundamental principle that had guided her throughout her career and particularly during the challenging period of her partnership dissolution. Authentic professional success, she told the assembled attorneys, is built on genuine competence, ethical representation, and respect for the trust that clients place in their legal counsel. No amount of networking or social positioning can substitute for the fundamental obligation to serve our clients with honesty and skill. The audience included Mrs. Patterson from Patterson Industries, who had specifically requested an invitation to witness Elena's recognition. During the reception following the ceremony, Mrs. Patterson approached Elena with tears in her eyes and deep gratitude in her voice. "Elena," Mrs. Patterson said, "I need you to know that your ethical representation literally saved our family business." When Mr. Webb agreed to those unnecessary environmental conditions during the zoning hearing, it would have cost us our entire profit margin for 3 years. Your intervention and the new compliance strategy you developed not only resolved our regulatory issues, but actually improved our operational efficiency. Mrs. Patterson's sentiment was echoed by Dr. Hartman from Hartman Medical Devices, whose company had grown substantially under Elena's guidance through complex FDA regulatory challenges that required genuine expertise rather than superficial confidence. Elena's specialized knowledge of medical device regulations had enabled Hartman Medical Devices to bring 3 innovative products to market ahead of their competitors. Elena's law firm had expanded beyond her most optimistic projections, now employing 12 attorneys and maintaining partnerships with Morrison, Klein & Associates that provided access to Fortune 500 clients throughout the southeastern region. The Martinez law offices occupied 2 floors of a prestigious downtown building, but Elena had insisted on maintaining her original 4th-floor space across the street from the defunct Webb and Martinez law offices as a reminder of the principles that had guided her success. Elena had hired 3 junior associates specifically to mentor them in ethical practice and authentic client service, emphasizing the values her own immigrant parents had instilled in her about the relationship between hard work, integrity, and genuine achievement. Maria Santos, a recent law school graduate whose family had emigrated from Guatemala, reminded Elena of her own journey from working multiple jobs to partnership in a prestigious firm. Carlos Rodriguez, whose parents had built a successful construction business after arriving from Mexico with nothing but determination and skill, brought the same work ethic to his legal practice that Elena recognized from her own background. Jennifer Kim, a first-generation Korean-American whose family had sacrificed everything for her education, demonstrated the kind of meticulous attention to detail that Elena valued in complex corporate transactions. Elena's mentoring approach emphasized authentic relationship building with clients, thorough preparation for every legal challenge, and the understanding that sustainable success required genuine expertise rather than inherited advantages or social connections. She regularly reminded her associates that their diverse backgrounds represented strengths rather than limitations in serving clients who valued competence and integrity over privilege and prestige. 6 months after the Bar Association ceremony, Elena received a letter that provided the final closure to her experience with Marcus Webb. The letter, written on plain stationery rather than law firm letterhead, contained Marcus's request for a meeting to discuss potential reconciliation and his hope that they might find a way to restore their professional relationship. Marcus's letter acknowledged his mistakes during their partnership dissolution and expressed regret for the manipulation and credit appropriation that had characterized his behavior during their final months as business partners. He mentioned that his 6-month license suspension had provided him with time for reflection and mandatory ethics training that had helped him understand the professional violations he had committed. Elena read Marcus's letter carefully, noting the genuine tone of regret, but also recognizing the underlying assumption that their professional relationship could somehow be restored through apology and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. She understood that Marcus was facing financial difficulties and limited employment opportunities due to his disciplinary record, but she also knew that trust, once fundamentally violated, could not be reconstructed through words alone. Elena's response to Marcus was professionally courteous but definitively final. She thanked him for his letter and acknowledged his apparent growth through the ethics training process, but explained that Martinez law had developed in a direction that made any business relationship with him inappropriate and potentially damaging to the firm's reputation for ethical practice. Elena concluded her response by suggesting that Marcus focus on rebuilding his own career through demonstrated ethical behavior and genuine client service rather than attempting to restore relationships that had been damaged by his previous professional misconduct. She wished him success in his future endeavors, but made clear that their professional paths would not intersect again. The final vindication of Elena's principled approach to legal practice came 3 years after Marcus's forced buyout, when Elena was invited to teach a seminar on professional ethics at the law school, where she had earned her degree while working multiple jobs to support herself. The course examined case studies of ethical violations and professional misconduct, using real examples to illustrate the importance of integrity in legal practice. Elena's first lecture of the semester focused on partnership dynamics and the importance of mutual respect and honest collaboration in building sustainable legal practices. She presented the Webb and Martinez case study as an example of how personal ambition and prejudicial assumptions could destroy professional relationships and ultimately harm both partners and clients. The students listened with fascination as Elena described the systematic credit appropriation, client manipulation, and billing irregularities that had characterized Marcus's behavior during their partnership dissolution. She emphasized that the case illustrated broader principles about authenticity versus performance in professional relationships and the long-term consequences of prioritizing short-term advantage over ethical obligation. Elena concluded her lecture by emphasizing that genuine professional success required authentic competence, ethical behavior, and respect for the diverse backgrounds and perspectives that enriched the legal profession. The students, many of whom came from immigrant families or working-class backgrounds similar to Elena's own, found inspiration in her story of principled resistance to manipulation and systematic discrimination. One student raised her hand to ask about the personal cost of Elena's decision to resist Marcus's manipulation rather than accept the subordinate role he had offered her in their restructured partnership. Elena paused thoughtfully before responding that the apparent security of accepting injustice was always temporary, while the satisfaction of building something authentic and ethical provided lasting fulfillment and genuine respect from colleagues and clients. Elena explained that her parents had taught her that dignity could not be purchased with money or security, and that self-respect required standing up for principles even when the immediate consequences seemed difficult or uncertain. Their immigrant experience had shown them that authentic success, built on genuine competence and ethical behavior, was more valuable than any advantage gained through compromise with injustice. As Elena concluded her lecture and watched the students file out of the classroom, many of them stopping to thank her for sharing her experience, she reflected on the complete vindication of her decision to resist Marcus's manipulation and build her own practice based on authentic expertise and ethical representation. The young woman who had worked 3 jobs to pay for law school, who had been dismissed by her privileged partner as someone whose contributions were merely supportive, had built one of the most respected legal practices in the metropolitan area, while her former partner struggled to rebuild a career damaged by his own arrogance and misconduct. Elena's story had become a teaching example throughout the legal community, illustrating the fundamental principle that authentic professional success could not be built on manipulation, credit appropriation, or the systematic devaluation of others' contributions. Her immigrant background and working-class values had proven to be sources of strength rather than limitations, enabling her to create genuine relationships with clients and colleagues who valued integrity over privilege. The contrast between Elena's continued success and Marcus's professional struggle provided a powerful lesson about the relationship between character and sustainable achievement. Elena's principled resistance to injustice had not only preserved her own dignity, but had also created opportunities for others who shared her commitment to ethical practice and authentic client service. Elena's triumph represented more than personal vindication. It demonstrated that the legal profession, despite its historical privileges and exclusions, could recognize and reward genuine competence and ethical behavior regardless of a person's background or social connections. Her success had opened doors for other immigrants and working-class attorneys who brought diverse perspectives and authentic values to the practice of law. The final irony of Elena's story was that Marcus's attempt to eliminate her as competition had actually elevated her to prominence within their professional community while destroying his own career through the revelation of his ethical violations and professional incompetence. His arrogant assumption that Elena's background made her vulnerable had blinded him to her actual strengths and strategic capabilities, leading to a complete miscalculation that cost him everything he thought he owned. Elena Martinez had proven that authentic success, built on genuine expertise and ethical principles, would always triumph over manipulation and privilege in any profession that ultimately depended on competence and integrity. Her story had become a powerful reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately prevails when people of principle refuse to accept the limitations that others attempt to impose upon them.